just start by explaining, if you want, like, if you could sum it up into 2 words, what is the opioid crisis?
In just 2 words, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just, big problem.
You're listening to Enhance, the podcast dedicated to highlighting real stories told by real people.
Thank you so much for tuning back into Enhance. I am your host, Sam Brown, and this is the 3rd episode. Today I am joined by a very good friend of mine named Chase. We went to college together and we were part of the same program in school. Chase, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name's Chase. Like Sam said, went to school together with him. We went through the video production program together. Happy to be here. Happy to talk to you guys.
And you also work kind of like, because I told them that I like work in film and TV. So you kind of like, you also work in television, don't you?
I do. I work for a local production company here in Baton Rouge. We make TV shows for the Outdoor Channel, so a lot of hunting and fishing focused stuff.
That's really cool. I do have an icebreaker to start us off. I forgot to warn you about that. So, so if you're open to it, it's just a little personality kind of test 1 question thing. So if you're cool with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So basically, it's just a simple question. What is your favorite weather and why?
Let me run through some options in my head real quick.
Okay.
I feel like that kind of depends based on season. Right now, being summer, I really enjoy like a nice, overcast, rainy, thunderstormy day because, I don't know about where you are, but it's been unbearably hot here lately, and just any ounce of wet or cool we can get is a breath of fresh air.
I hear you. Up in Charlotte, it's been pretty rainy. I was surprised to find that it's very rainy up here. You would probably like to be up here a little bit more.
It's rained a lot lately here, too, and I've been loving it.
Good. So you can have more than one. So if you have another one that's like your favorite winter weather, or is it just kind of like you like overcast and rainy all around?
Ooh, in winter, I'd probably prefer like a nice, still brisk and cool but sunny day.
That sounds nice. Like where the sun is definitely shining down on you, and you can feel a little heat from it, but it's still like a nice coolness in the air.
A little best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So whenever you think of those 2 different types of weather, what does that make you feel? Like what draws you to that weather?
So when I'm thinking about the hot day and the thunderstorm overcast, I'm thinking just kind of like calmness, tranquility, kind of a certain peace you get when it's just like, okay, I can sit inside, don't really have to go anywhere, do anything, just need to listen to the storm and be here now.
Awesome. And then is that kind of something similar for the winter one, or is there a different feeling that comes with that?
I would say there's a different feeling that comes with that one. That one, it's a lot more active. And weather like that, that's when I like to, get outside and do stuff and take in nature. So, that, weather like that, it makes me think of, like camping and hiking.
Yeah.
And just like being out and, experiencing this world for what it is.
Absolutely. I like both of those. So basically, how you answer the question, and I don't know what your like spiritual beliefs are or anything like that, but how you answer the question can be a reflection of how you look at God, the universe, like whatever you believe your divine being is. It can show like a little bit of how you see them and your relationship with them. And so that would mean that whenever you think of like the universe, or even if your spirituality or your like God, quote unquote, is like science, if you're an atheist and you don't believe in like, anything supernatural or paranormal or anything like that, it still shows a reflection of like how you see that higher power, So you would see them as very peaceful, a place of peace, like almost like a break from the world, and maybe even a little like adventuring, like you feel safe to go out and adventure because of how you felt about the winter weather. So would you say that that's accurate?
I would say that's absolutely accurate. I really like that exercise, actually.
A friend of mine asked me this years ago while I was in college. It was my senior year. And whenever I answered that question, then my favorite type of weather was storms. I love storms. I love tornadoes. Like I love just anything chaotic in nature. And my reasoning behind it was because whenever a huge storm like that happens, you have no control over it. There's nothing that humans can do to fight a tornado or fight a hurricane. To me, it was just sort of like nature's way of just saying fuck you. Like you have destroyed my planet, you've done whatever, you cannot control me, I'm not gonna fit into your like bubble. Then whenever she told me that that was a reflection of how I saw like a higher power, I thought that was really, really interesting, because there is a lot of accuracy in that. Whenever I think of a higher power, it's like they're outside of our, like we cannot impact them, it's gonna just exist no matter what. The only thing that's changed now is that I revisited these questions a little while back whenever I was at like a little dinner thing with some friends, and my favorite weather is still definitely storms, but I also have this specific one that's kind of similar to the winter one that you said, but it's like that very small time frame in between, like, or during spring, and that small time frame during fall where the seasons are transitioning, and you can feel a little bit of summer, but also like it's really cold in the morning, and then it gets kind of warm during the day and then cold again at night. And that transition period, it's just, there's something so peaceful about it to me. Or like it's a hot day but the wind is super cold, and like you can feel it, it's still that winter wind. And to me that was very peaceful and very like calming. And so again, like higher power, very peaceful, very calming. So yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, Chase, I'll let you, because just to be completely honest with everyone, I am not very educated on this whatsoever, and I'm very interested to talk to someone who is very passionate about it. I have some experience whenever it comes to like drug addiction, or even like having to take medication, but I'm gonna let Chase introduce our topic today, because this is a very big passion of his.
Okay, so the topic we're going to talk about today is the opioid crisis. So, I mean, I guess I'll start out with my own like personal introduction to the topic. So, when I was a senior in high school, I got into a skateboarding accident, and I really just badly wrenched one of my ankles. I remember getting into the ER, and they were looking at the X-rays, just like kind of like, what the hell happened here? That was, a 2 surgery thing. Had to have, bone implant and all kinds of hardware put into that ankle. And so that was a 3-month long period of recovery. It was essentially my entire summer after graduating high school. I mean, I was essentially bedridden that entire summer, and I was post-surgery for a lot of it. It was essentially that 3-month stretch. They had prescribed me Percocet. I had been taking Percocet for the pain. If it was immediately post-surgery, I'd be taking it for 4 times a day. Later on, it was maybe like once or twice, but it was still, there was, in that 3-month span, there was not a day where I did not have pain medication. And at the time, I was very naive to the topic. I was just like, give it to you at the hospital and it makes you feel kind of good, makes your pain go away, whatever. I went through this entire process, and then it wasn't until I got out of that and I was on the other side and I had, completed my recovery and was walking again, that I started to look back on that span of months and realize just like how much of a different person I was and how much that has affected the way I am now. I mean, and it was really interesting. It was something that really made me kind of start questioning, just like, what is up with these medications and what they do to us? And it's obviously such a big problem, and I could see from a personal perspective how it could be at that point going forward. I was really interested in learning more about the topic, spreading awareness, and since then it's become much more of an issue, especially with the outbreak of fentanyl being cut into a variety of non-opioid drugs and killing people, especially here in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, New Orleans area. It's kind of a hotbed for that entire thing. I've unfortunately known multiple people that have died from that, unknowingly taking fentanyl that had been mixed in with some other drug. It's a real issue.
I'm really glad that you brought up fentanyl, and I'm going to be very precise with what I say just out of respect for this person's family. I did lose a very, very special friend of mine earlier this year. He had some back issues, and he had prescription medication. He was running low because he also worked in the same industry that I did, and he had been traveling, and he had a doctor's appointment, but he ran out before his doctor's appointment to get his prescription refilled. He had a friend who was on the same type of medication as him, that he asked, hey, can I just bum one of yours and I'll give you, one of mine? And no matter what your opinion is on that situation, this was not him using, this wasn't him being a druggie or anything like that. This was him just thinking, oh, this is the medication I was prescribed. And he didn't know that his friend had bought some off the street. And his friend was like, sure, and gave him one of his pills, and he ended up overdosing because it was fentanyl. He was just a very special person all around. He was just very caring, and I was not the only person that was heartbroken by his death. There were tons of people. Just down in Alabama, he had so many people that cared about him and loved him. One of my really good friends that was up in New York, she grieved very hard and actually ended up becoming friends with his family, and it just really hit her because she was like a mother figure to him. And he was just very kind to her, and, it was such a hard loss, and I dealt with a lot of bitterness after that happened. I just didn't have anyone to blame. You can blame the friend, but the friend didn't know. You could blame whoever he got it from, but like the thing is that there's more at play here than just one simple person selling fentanyl. There's a lot more going on here. How did this even begin? Where did we start seeing, one, medications that make people reliant on them flooding the public, and then two, those medications being replaced by even more harmful ones that kill people almost instantly?
Really, the core to that you need to address is the insane addiction potential of these medications. It doesn't matter if you're taking it prescribed or if you're getting it off the street or wherever. It's going to affect you regardless. It's going to have you dependent on it, regardless of if you're taking it as prescribed medicinally or if you're abusing it off the street. That's one thing that a lot of people just don't think about. They think, the doctor told me to take this, and if I do it as he says, nothing bad can happen to me. Going back to when I was on the medication, that was 3 month span, and I wasn't without it a day. And I was thinking, this is what the doctor told me to do. It should be no problem. And they were like, okay, you might have a little uneasiness when you stop taking the medication. It shouldn't be anything too serious. It was like a week of full-blown, withdrawal symptoms. I didn't sleep. It was just, kind of curled up in the fetal position all night, cold sweats, vomiting. It was a mess. It was nasty. It was awful. And I was like, how is it that something that can do this to you when you stop taking it has become so normalized in the pharmaceutical industry? One of the big things that I recommend to people who are wanting to learn more about this topic, it's a documentary on Netflix. It's called The Pharmacist. And it's very close to me because it takes place just outside of New Orleans. It particularly pertains to OxyContin, but it's the same can be said for pretty much all, kind of pill-based opioid medication. It tells you a lot about this process. So these medications were available starting in the early 1900s, but it wasn't until the early 90s that they started prescribing them for chronic pain conditions. Before then, you would only get prescribed these medications if you had some sort of crazy surgery like I did, and it was, a situational pain that would go away and you needed it for that time period just to get through that recovery, or if you had cancer-related pain. But then in the early 90s, the company in charge of OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, they talk about them a lot in that documentary, they made a change and decided we're going to start prescribing this medication for people with chronic pain conditions. Chronic pain can be sort of subjective. From a doctor's perspective and a patient's perspective. That is kind of what opened this door up. And that is where you started seeing these streets, be flooded with all of these pills, because these people are not only able to get them, but able to get them long term. You get a chronic pain diagnosis, you have a ticket to these pills for essentially the rest of your life.
Yeah. I think that definitely plays into as well, our society has become so fast paced, and our society has become so instant gratification based, maybe that could have played into it, maybe, or even that happened because of how our society was going. People are like, oh, I'm in pain now, I need a fix. And so they don't find what the root of the problem is causing the pain, and the doctor doesn't push for that. And I'm in a situation right now where I've been having a lot of health issues. I had an autoimmune disease when I was growing up. It was rheumatoid arthritis, which is where your immune system sees your joints as foreign objects and starts attacking them and eating them. And so I had to fight that really aggressively when I was growing up. And now I'm in a quote unquote remission for it. I still test positive for it. My RA levels are always at a resting high, but it's not affecting me anymore. It's not attacking my joints anymore. Because of how aggressively they treated that when I was growing up, I have long-lasting effects of it. Because of that, chronic pain, because that's what my doctor said, is like, you have chronic pain. And I do still have like phantom pains, even though there's no degeneration or anything like that. I went to my doctor because I was having like a list of symptoms. And I went at different times because each symptom started like a few like months after each other. And she just kept slapping like small little labels on it. And it was all based around the fact that I was on that medication whenever I was younger. She never like pushed to get to the core of it. And now that I'm in a different state with doctors that have never seen me before or anything like that, I find out that it's something that could be very, very serious. And so now I'm facing that, where like, if the doctor would have taken a little bit more time instead of just giving me like muscle relaxers, I probably could have gotten this, taken care of years ago when I very first started going to her about it.
Oh yeah, just like medical negligence plays a huge role in this. One of the things they covered in the pharmacist is they call it a pill mill doctor. Essentially, this is someone, they have a doctorate operating their own clinic, but it's essentially just a trap house. People can go in there off the street, and the doctor in there is writing a ridiculous amount of prescriptions, typically getting a payout from, the big pharma company for selling or, giving a lot of prescriptions for their medication. So these people go in, can get these prescriptions super easy. Obviously, this doctor has no qualms about very large amounts of this medication, so they're turning around, keeping their stash and selling the rest on the street, and it's spreading, and then more people are going to these places. And that was how it all started. You get a couple corrupt doctors pushing this product. Next thing you know, you have everyone flocking to them, and even if they get shut down, these people are still addicted, and they're going to find some way to get it.
Yeah, my sister, so hopefully she does not mind me sharing this, but I have several siblings, so you guys don't know who I'm talking about. But I have a sister that she has always been just like a go-getter. Like, whenever I was growing up, she was like an OG feminist, like, without even knowing that she was a feminist. Anything that a man could do, she was like, I can do it, right? And she absolutely could. And so she used to work with her husband at the time's uncle, hanging like sheetrock in like houses that he was building. One day, someone was spotting her on the ladder, but they stepped away. And so she was like, oh, well, I need that sheetrock on the ground, and nobody was nearby. So she just reached over and picked it up and went to put it up. And when she did, she pulled like this muscle. I don't know which one it was, but it went all the way down her back, pulled it, and like was in extreme pain. And she said whenever it happened, she almost fell off the ladder because she lost all feeling in her back. And she like had to grab a hold to the ladder and like ease herself down. And for the first little bit, like, she couldn't even sit up straight all the way. Like, when she was standing, she was still kind of hunched over. When she went to the doctor, they prescribed her Klonopin, because they were like, oh, this is just going to take a really long time to heal. You're just going to have to take it easy. Here's something to help with the pain. She had 2 children. This was whenever her second daughter was very little. She was on them for a little while, but didn't like that she was starting to become addicted to them. She felt like she was dependent on them. And so she stopped taking them. After she got through that initial withdrawal, which really wasn't that terrible for her, thankfully. But once she got through it, one night we were all just sitting in my living room, like hanging out, chit-chatting, and she was holding my little niece, her youngest daughter, who was like, a little baby, like had to be probably like 6 or 7 months. We were just talking, all of a sudden she just kind of sat back, and we didn't know what was going on, and she had a seizure, and like a terrible, like, grand mal seizure. And my mom jumped up and caught my niece because my niece was about to hit the floor. My brother grabbed my sister. They all just sprung into action, but they had no idea what happened. So they made a doctor's appointment, but that week she ended up having like 2 more. So she had to go to the hospital. Come to find out, Klonopin can cause you to have seizures, and the only way to stop it is to go back on Klonopin. She has fought drug addiction for years, and it all started there. And she was probably like 18 or 19 at that time. She was just newlywed, like had 2 young children, and she's in her 30s now, and she's finally like really clean, and she's really doing well for herself and everything, and just trying to put her life back together. But she, went through all the phases that an addict does, and it all started with a prescription.
And that's the sad thing about it. And what I'm not saying that these shouldn't be prescribed, because there are situations where they definitely should be. There are some chronic pain patients that really need that. What I'm trying to point out is the volume of this product that is being pushed is not meeting the amount of people that needs it. It's far exceeding it. The tough part about it is, like you were just talking about, situational. pain med use. I remember when I was going through that, I was faced with a tough choice. I could feel, that I was becoming dependent on it, but at the same time, it was like, what are my other options? I could take this, or I could lay in bed all day miserable from having my foot hacked off and put back together. And it's really like kind of a catch-22. And if you have to take it and it has that addictive potential, then you're gonna get hooked. There's really nothing you can do about it. I started to be like, what are the other options here? And there are non-opioid pain medications. I personally don't have any personal experience with them, or really know anyone that has, so I don't really know how effective they might be. I just feel like there has to be something out there that could help people with this pain that's not going to put them through more pain.
I mean, I feel like marijuana is a really good, what could be a good resource if all states would just get together and be like, all right, let's legalize medicinal marijuana. You can become dependent on marijuana, but it's not in itself inherently addictive. You have to have like an addictive personality, and you have to use it so often that you become dependent on it. But that's treatable, like extremely treatable. You go to therapy, you work with a specialist.
I totally agree with that, but I also understand that there are some forms of pain that medical marijuana can treat. It'd be great if all these lesser forms of pain we could send that way, but can't get all the states to agree. It's still federally illegal, so that's a whole mess. But I mean, if we could do that, that would still leave the people with this extreme pain that would be getting prescribed these and still having major problems with them. A lot of it is when you're on an opioid medication, it creates sort of a disconnect between your mind and your body. It overwhelms your mind with this euphoria in order to offset the physical pain that you were experiencing. In doing that, it almost disconnects your brain from its actions, because your brain no longer has an emotional drive to it. It's just, I feel great. There's nothing I should change. There's nothing I should do differently. You could be just like hurting people, like being like a total asshole, but you feel great, and your mind's disconnected from your body, and your brain's not telling you there's anything you need to change. It's a real mess getting addicted to something like that.
The thing that you were saying about like the disconnect between, your mind and your body, that immediately just stood out to me, because that sounds a lot like dissociation. I've literally talked about this so many times already on the podcast, but I have severe ADHD that I was not diagnosed with until I got into adulthood. Whenever I finally got diagnosed, I was able to start medication. I have a pretty good specialist. He really checks in with me. He makes sure that, I'm handling everything okay. But the one thing that he did really, really well was that he really educated me on how Adderall works. Because it's a methamphetamine, and that immediately is a red flag. And that's something that my sister, sadly, whenever she started experiencing her addiction and she went through all these different drugs because of the high, she got used to the high, one thing that she did try was meth. Taking a methamphetamine regularly, really, I was very uneasy about it. But once I started taking it, because of how he educated me, I've done really, really well on it. But I did everything he told me to do. However, I haven't gotten addicted to it. And I know that there's a lot of people that do become very, very reliant and addicted to Adderall. But I think what's also interesting that I have noticed is how quick medical professionals are to be like, oh, you're getting used to it? All right, let's just up your dosage. They started me off on a really low dosage. They started me off on a dosage that they start small children off on, which also I was like, you're giving small children Adderall, So I worked my way up to where I am now. And now I'm on a high dosage, but not like an extremely high dosage. And I've just refused to go any higher. The whole point in this was the dissociation. So that's something that a lot of people with ADHD experience, or any type of learning disability. For anybody that doesn't understand what dissociation is, when you're driving and you're on your way to somewhere that's very, very familiar to you, those moments where you just kind of like daze out, and then whenever you get home and you're like, how did I get back home? Like, I've talked to so many people that experience this that don't have any type of like disability or anything like that, and it's just that it's muscle memory, and their subconscious just kind of takes over and their mind wanders. That's dissociation, and that's a form of dissociation. There's also a type of dissociation where you literally feel like you are in a video game and you are simply controlling your body to do different things. You don't feel connected to your reality and your body. So it's interesting to me that people with ADHD have that, and then Adderall helps them not have it. But then people that don't have it experience it through opioids. It's so strange to me that it's like they're both addictive, but there's like this weird pass off where it's like one person is trying to obtain what the other has, and both of it seems like an escapism. ADHD is trying to escape that dissociation that they're forced to exist in around the clock, but then other people, like they're in pain or whatever it is that's going on, and they're trying to escape that to get somewhere else.
Exactly, and I mean that's exactly what it is. It's an escape to some people. The people that are addicted to it, it's an escape. When I first got off the medication, and I was learning to walk again, was going through physical therapy. That was a lot of pain, and this was the first time dealing with this, ankle and foot pain without those pain meds. Once I'd gone through the withdrawal, I was like, I don't want to touch this shit again. There's always that nagging in the back of my brain. It was just like, man, if I had one of those, this pain would be gone. I've developed a slight chronic pain condition from it. I have early onset arthritis. You were talking about phantom pains earlier. I get phantom pains, and that sometimes it almost just feels like I'm still recovering from the surgery, the incision. It'll just kind of ping me sometimes. I mean, it's gotten less over the years, but in those times there's still that voice in the back. You're just like, this could go away if you wanted it to,
Yeah.
And it's just like, that addiction never really leaves you. And when you first get hooked on it, whether you're, doing it for recreational purposes or medicinal, there's a reason you're doing it. There's something you're trying to escape from. Once you realize that you can escape from it, that realization never goes away. It's always kind of in the back of your head. If you're hurting and you need an escape, that's there. That's why it has such a high issue with relapses. People can get clean, but it's also always in the back of their head, and if they give in to that, then they're right back on the wagon. You talked about doctors upping dosages once you get adjusted to medication. I never had that when I was going through with this. They had me on the highest dose from the start. We'll admit, right after surgery and I was taking that, I was still feeling pain. So, I mean, I needed that kind of high dosage, I guess, to kill most of it. Back in 2015, my grandmother had cancer. She had terminal cancer, and she was an oncology nurse her whole life. So that was kind of a awful irony. So she decided not to go through with the chemo, and when she did, they started prescribing her pain medication, which is understandable. Cancer, that's a lot of pain. But so I mean, she was taking the pain medication, and they just kept upping the dosage. And when they couldn't up the dosage anymore, they just kept sending more. Just more quantities. I mean, by the time she passed away, we had a ridiculous amount of bottles of oxycodone, Percocet, all those various pills, but we had enough fentanyl patches alone to probably kill the entire neighborhood. I mean, it was crazy. Charities, they do the prescription recycling programs. After that, a lot of her useful medications, we donated to them, but the heavier stuff, we just threw all that away. We had so much of it. It was ridiculous. There were enough painkillers there to last a hive of addicts, and it was for one person.
That was something too that I experienced. Now, my sister, of course, did not have cancer, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. That was something too that I saw with her, is that they just kept throwing new medication at her. Like, oh, well, you don't want to take the Klonopin, try this. They gave her Lortab. I'm not educated on which one is what, the chemicals that go into what, but I feel like Lortab is a lot more common than Klonopin. They bounced from that to Lortab and to a lower dose, and it just, they went around in circles. I mean, she genuinely tried. That's the thing that I don't think people understand whenever you talk about an addict. They're like, oh, they're out there just ruining their life, they're making bad decisions, blah blah blah. My sister tried. She tried very hard. She had a house, her husband went out of town and stuff like that and worked all the time, so she had a house, she had 2 kids, she had her own car, and this was she was always so responsible, and she was just out there trying to live her life. When this happened to her, she tried everything. She stopped smoking cigarettes. She was like, I need to get everything that's addictive away from me so I can fight this. But then when she would fight it, her seizures would come back. It was just this constant, endless cycle. And now she's, like I said, finally in a good place. And she only has seizures now when she gets really, really, really stressed out, or if she gets really upset about something very quickly, and she can feel it when it starts to happen. So she knows to sit down and just get ready. And she actually had a dog too that was she wasn't certified to be a helper dog or whatever, I forget what they're called, but she knew how to help my sister. When she felt it coming, her dog would come in there and she would lay down with my sister. And there was something with, and I don't know if this is like this with most people who have seizures, but with my sister, if you could touch her face, or if you could talk to her or hum to her and look at her in her eyes, it always helped her come out of it easier. There was something pulling her back. So the dog would just sit there and kind of lick her in the face and lay with her. And then when my sister came back, she was like, okay, cool, And so of course that helped her over the years develop this pattern and this almost self-therapy with having seizures, and so that's been a very big help in her fighting her addiction too, and staying clean.
Mm-hmm. And that's the trouble with opiates. Like, getting clean requires confronting whatever you're trying to escape from, whether it be, seizures or pain, or whether that be physical or emotional. It's just like, if you're going to break yourself out of that cycle, you have to confront that, and it's the fear of doing so that keeps people locked into that addiction cycle.
Yeah. It's like the feeling that whatever situation you're in will never end. That's something that, like, whenever I very first started going to therapy, I've luckily never dealt with addiction. I was diagnosed with a binge eating disorder. It's similar to addiction, like you can go to OA and things like that, but it's not actually being reliant on a substance. It's that you are addicted to overeating. And I've actually gotten past it, and I've found my ways to deal with it. And I'm lucky and happy to say that I have conquered it, and I'm good now, and I don't binge anymore. But when going through that was something that I had to go through a lot of therapy to figure out, like, what is it that is causing this inside of me? Like, what am I trying to deal with? What am I trying to cope with? And basically, the first step in that was whenever I went to a therapist, one of my very first therapists, she taught me to remember that, like, this is just a moment. Whatever you're dealing with right now is only in this moment. There is no promise that it's going to last forever. And that was like the biggest thing for me to be able to go, okay, I can have hope now. And then hope helped fuel me getting better and just healing all around.
Exactly. That's what it is. So many people that are addicted, they're alone, unfortunately. Reaching out to a therapist or just finding a friend to just talk to about that. Sometimes that's all it takes to get that additional perspective you need to kind of get to the mind state where you can pull yourself out and find the motivation to confront your issues instead of just escaping them.
Absolutely. Moving forward, if there's anything that you think that we all can do as a society to help start to alleviate this, what would it be?
I think, in general, politically, I'm not a huge fan of government intervention in most fields, but I think that, that's really all we can push for here is for the federal government to put bigger regulations on pharmaceutical companies like Purdue that push these drugs and market these drugs knowing their side effects and profiting billions of dollars off of them while they're getting a large section of the populace addicted and killing them by overdose. And it's a problem. But I think another thing is simply just raising awareness. So many people, they go in, they have to get their first major surgery, and they're like, okay, we're going to put you on pain medication, and they don't really know that much about it. They're like, okay, if the doctor is giving it to me, it must be safe health-wise. That doesn't mean you're not going to experience, the addictive effects, the psychological effects, the dissociative effects like we talked about, especially, the withdrawal. Regardless of why you're taking it, the medication doesn't care. If you stop taking it, it's going to mess with your body.
Absolutely. Well, I think I feel like we had a really great conversation, and if we ever want to do like a part 2, we absolutely can. But is there anything you'd like to add?
I kind of feel like that was a good ending point. If you want to do a part 2 to it, I would be more than open. Especially if you wanted to watch The Pharmacist, and we could talk about that. I feel like that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I think I'll do that. All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning back in. This is the Enhanced Podcast. If you want to find us on social media, you can find me at Sammed if you do. That's SAMMED if you do. No spaces, no funky characters or anything like that. I'm that on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can find the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast and Anchor at Enhance, and then you can also find it on YouTube at Enhance Podcast. Chase, is there anything you want to promote? Anything you want to put out there?
I would recommend anyone that has been interested in this conversation to go watch The Pharmacist on Netflix. I have no affiliation with them. I was just really, really moved by that documentary, and especially a guy that it's based around. He's just a really, really powerful character. It's worth a watch.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much again, and this was Enhance. See you guys next week.
Enhance your peace,
your joy,
and your existence.